Alright, so you got yourself a new camera and you're ready to start macro photography. Only problem is your camera has 9 million settings, and even if you're already a professional photographer, you quickly realize that things don't quite work the same in the macro world. Don't worry, in the next few minutes you're going to learn everything you need to know to take quality macro photos like this. I'm going to briefly explain what settings you should use and why you should use them. I'll try to keep things simple and beginner friendly, but I'm going to move at a quick pace, so if there's anything that you need more information on, make sure to leave it down in the comments. I'll try to make a follow-up video about it. Before we begin, I want to welcome you to Old Man Jacob Photography and also point out that this is video number 3 of a beginner macro photography series. If you still need some help choosing your gear, make sure to click this video that's linked. Alright, first things first. You're going to want to shoot in manual mode. I know that sounds intimidating, but I promise you it's going to be easy. You're also going to want to make sure that your lens has the ability to manually focus. I'm going to leave the settings on each screen for each section, so you can pause if you need to find them for your specific camera. The first thing you're going to want to do is set your ISO to the base ISO. Now you can find out what the base ISO is by searching for your camera's manual online, or if you've still got it laying around. If you can't figure out what it is, just assume that it's 100. That's typically the base on a lot of cameras. The reason we're going to use the base ISO is because there's no reason to use a higher one. We're going to be always shooting with a flash, so we're always going to have the proper light, and a lower ISO will give us a clearer image with less distortion. Next, we're going to look at shutter speed. Now, typically you're going to want to shoot with a shutter speed that's set at your camera's max flash sync speed. This is typically around 1/160th of a second. On some cameras, it may be as fast as 1/250th of a second. Again, you're going to need to consult your camera's manual, or if you have the flash plugged in, just see how high it'll let you turn the shutter speed up before it won't let you anymore. That's your max flash sync speed. So like I said, max flash sync speed is going to be your go-to almost all times. The one exception would be if you have a background that's a little farther away from your subject and you'd like to get some more of that color into the shot. In those cases, you might lower your shutter speed down to as low as maybe 1/100th of a second, and your flash should still be able to freeze the motion. Now finally, to round out the exposure triangle, we need to set our aperture. You're almost always going to be shooting in the realm of f8 to f11. Some lenses, like the M.Zuiko lenses, are sharpest at f10, so you're almost always going to be shooting at that. So why this range of f8 to f11? Well, firstly, most lenses are sharpest around f8, most macro lenses at least, so you want to stay kind of close to that anyways. Secondly, we're always battling a small depth of field in macro photography, and while you may be tempted to go to something like f16 or f22, you won't gain much depth of field at those closed f-stops, but what you will gain is a lot of softness in your image due to diffraction. Again, this can be a complicated topic, so let me know in the comments if you want me to go into more detail. For the time being though, I would personally recommend the following. If you're shooting single shots at 2x magnification, shoot at f8. Shooting single shots at 1x magnification, try shooting at f11. Or if you're using an M.Zuiko lens, shoot at f10. If you're shooting a stacked image and you want the background to stay soft, you may go as low as f5.6. See? Manual mode is easy. You've already got all of your settings set, and you're basically going to leave them there almost all the time. So how do you control your exposure? Well, in macro photography, your exposure is almost always controlled by the flash. Basically, if your image is too dark, turn the flash power up. If it's too bright, turn the flash power down. That easy. I would recommend starting with a flash power of around 1/16th. And if your image is too dark, just go ahead and bump it up. Too bright, go ahead and bump it down. And since we can't always trust our eyes, the next setting that you're going to want to do is turn your histogram on. You can set this to show always, or just be on top of your images when you're previewing them. Now, as long as your histogram isn't completely touching the left or the right, your images will be exposed well enough to edit later. And speaking of editing later, you're going to want to set your camera to save to RAW. We're going to do this to preserve our editing capabilities. If you save to JPEG, you're going to lose a lot of that capability. After that, you're going to want to activate focus peaking. So focus peaking will highlight parts of your image that are sharp, typically with red or yellow sometimes, You're going to want to use this because it's very hard to see the eyes of your subject and you're trying to get your eyes in focus. So if you have focus peaking activated as you're taking an image of your subject, you'll know that you've got the proper focus when the eyes are glowing red. Now, some people like to use focus magnification also. I don't personally use focus magnification. I prefer focus peaking, but you can go ahead and try either of them and experiment. Who knows, you may just end up using both. Now for white balance, you're going to want to set your white balance to your flash's temperature. You can usually find this in the documentation of the flash. If you can't find anything, just assume that it's somewhere around 5500. If you want to test if you have your white balance set correctly, just take a picture of a piece of paper using your flash and then go into Photoshop and use the eyedropper tool on the piece of paper. If it makes adjustments to your temperature, then you need to adjust your white balance in camera. Now, a lot of cameras will let you adjust the picture preview. That's where when you take a picture, it'll show on the back screen the picture that you just took. I would suggest turning that off completely. Before you start photographing, what I always do is I'll take a picture of my thumb and I'll set my exposure, my flash power, everything based off of that picture of my thumb. After that, you don't want to be checking on the photos that you just took, or you're gonna miss opportunities. Just forget about previewing your photos until you're done photographing your subject. Again, you can preview images in between subjects. You just don't need to be checking them after every shot. Now, if your camera has the ability to keep adjustments like exposure compensation off of the viewfinder, you're going to want to use that setting. This is usually called live view. You need to make sure that your view is clear of all effects and exposure compensation, or it's going to be too dark to see what you're photographing. The one thing that you will want to leave on your viewfinder is the grid. Go ahead and activate this, especially if you're a beginner. It'll really help with composition in the beginning and framing even as you become more experienced. I usually have mine set to the rule of thirds. Finally, if your camera has a programmable button to switch between single shot and burst mode, use it. Most of the time, you're probably going to be shooting in single shots, but it's nice to be able to quickly switch to burst mode just in case you're trying to catch some brief action, like a bee taking off, for example. All right, everyone. Now, I know that was a lot to take in, so I've went ahead and taken the time to list all these settings down in the description. That way you can take the time to find them for your specific camera. If you have any questions, let me know. We may make a follow-up video. Now, get out there and, you don't know how to focus yet. You better watch the next video. See you next time.